Hey everybody, welcome to Good Question, where we're going to spend some time talking about what's good and what's true. My name is Curtis Childs, and I'll be your host, and I have an awesome panel with me here today. Cara Dom, Latin consultant for the New Century Edition, is here.
Howdy.
Chris Dunn, community manager with Swedenborg Foundation. Chelsea Odener, production manager and writer for Swedenborg Life and a multitude of other things. Thanks everyone for spending some time. Yeah. And thanks to all of you in the audience. If you've never played this game before, it's easy and fun and rewarding. There's two things you got to do. The first is like and subscribe, because that's the thing that's going to keep this channel going. It's a sign of you appreciating us and the content we're making. And also then enter your questions in the chat. That's you in the chat there. All this stuff is not pre-rehearsed, and it's live and spontaneous, and we get our questions right out of what you guys are doing there. So get those in and we will answer them. But first, we have an important, exciting announcement to make. Did you guys know that? Yeah, we have coming up a one-of-a-kind, first-of-its-kind, in-person Off the Left Eye experience. I'm talking about the Off the Left Eye Experience 2020, entitled The Spiritual World Around You. This is June 5th through 8th, 2020 in Bryn Athyn, Pennsylvania, where our offices are. We want you all to come and stay with us for the weekend, and we get to look at ideas from this awesome stuff and study them in depth and go in immersion from thing to thing to thing. Let's take this experience and stretch it out and see if we can't get deeper in. Okay? Check it out here. There's a link in the description, swedenborg.com/event/OTLE 2020. All of us are going to be there. Super fun. Hope to see you there as well. Okay, cool. All right, that was a good rehearsal. Let's do the real thing now. All right, what's the first question that we've got? Prelim minimal. Do you have any insights on to pray unselfishly if we have concerns of any kind? Okay, so we've got the idea that this prayer is sort of a confusing thing, because are you petitioning God to have things work more in your favor than for somebody else's? How much is motivation important when you're engaging in something? And I would love to hear from all of you. What's your practice? Do you have some experience with this? So.
So, thy will be done. That's a good place to start. I find that I pray for people to be able to align themselves with what is. Like, however it is that the Lord's working things out, that people can somehow accept that and figure out how they can live with that. It's not very comforting.
No.
But it's because that's what we struggle against. Like, I can't accept that my loved one is not being healed of cancer or something like that. But if we pray for them to be able to somehow accept that and know that it's leading somewhere eventually to our highest good,
Yeah, so more praying for their spiritual state than the physical state.
Outcome, yeah, right.
Which is, I guess, sort of was the Swedenborg's experience, was he learned all this stuff, and it wasn't, okay, here's how you change physical life. It was more, here's how you change your attitude and your motives and how you perceive things, and that's what leads to peace and happiness. So that's great. I love that. Chris or Chelsea?
Yeah, I wonder, the way I'm reading the question is insights on, I guess, like how to pray unselfishly if we have concerns of any kind, like potentially selfish concerns or something. And I guess the thought that is coming to my mind right now related to that is like remembering that the Lord does loves us and wants to connect with us and understands that we have concerns. So to sort of not feel a sense of it sounds a little bit like a self-judgment going on if it's like, oh, I've got these selfish concerns. So even to sort of soften into the there's this divine presence with me that wants to help me. If that was really the truth, how might even my perspective on my selfish concerns might change? Maybe some sort of a compassionate perspective on whatever it is that's coming up for you, whatever those concerns are.
Yeah. And do you think that people at times feel like, oh, I couldn't ask for something that will benefit me because I have to ask for things that will benefit other people? But it seems like, how are you going to benefit other people unless you get the things you need to fill you out?
Right. Connecting with that love that's, wants to be benefiting us as well. Yeah.
Right. Well, and I think Swedenborg will talk about it's okay to want to have nice things and be well cared for if the overarching purpose is to be useful.
Yeah.
But you can certainly, without building the right foundation for yourself, you're not doing anything. for anyone.
Yeah.
Yeah, Chris. So
Yeah, I just was reading a book, and one of my favorite quotes in it was, "Treat yourself like someone you're responsible for." And to me, like when I think about selfish versus unselfish prayer, it's really about like your end goal. Like, is your intention to connect to God in prayer for the sake of maybe becoming a better person or getting certain things so that you can in the end do good with that. That to me is a noble thing. But if it's just for the sake of self outside of any other broader goals, I think that's the discernment that needs to happen. Why are you praying?
yeah,
What's the end goal?
right.
Yep.
Well, that makes me think of Swedenborg in a couple of passages that we were looking at for some shows. Talks about people who they believe in God, but that's because they believe God will benefit them. And the less that life or God benefits them, the less that they believe. So that makes me think if I'm turning to God and asking for something, the good thing I can get out of that is just even realizing that, I am not in control of whether this thing happens or not. Even that asking, regardless of whether I get the object, can be, to me, that's much more valuable than whatever I'm asking for, is reinforcing that belief that Swedenborg says is the key to all peace and happiness, that it's up to God. It's up to God. Okay. Well, I like that. Preliminal. Thank you for giving us that journey of pronouncing your name, and thank you for that question. Okay, next one is Candace Andrea. Where does mental illness come from? Can we just clear that up real quick?
Yeah, real quick. Real quick.
Well, yeah. What do you think?
Well, as far as Swedenborg was writing in the 1700s, so I'm not up to speed on modern, I don't know. So, I'm bringing some of my own contemporary understanding, but then sort of trying to understand what Swedenborg does say about it. And one of the things he does say is that we are spirits in a body, and yet if the vessel of our body, it can have issues with it that make the spirit not be able to function through it in a proper way. And so there's definitely that there can be a physical, whether we call it biochemical or whatever sort of aspect to mental illness that is at play. That can be at play, but it's a complex phenomenon, I think.
Yeah.
So I think there's more to it than just that, but
Right.
or there could be.
One of my hopes is that eventually we'll get some real serious study from people who do understand everything about modern psychology and look at Swedenborg's model, and where is the crossover? Because he seems to he definitely talks about a separate category of things which doesn't call mental illness. The term wasn't around, but we'll say, like, I'm thinking of the section where he says nobody is reformed in a state of, I don't know if it's
Without
translated mental illness or without rationality. In there's some subcategory where he talks about mental impairment.
Yes.
And that seems to be separate from, there are a lot of things that today fit under the umbrella of mental illness, which would be, I think, epitomized in the voices that people hear in their heads, which Swedenborg seems to describe that having a very direct spiritual cause, but yet also has these other states of mental illness that he doesn't necessarily label in the same way. So I just reinforcing what you said, that there's a complex interaction of multiple systems there that leads to our conscious health or disquiet.
And there is a certain amount, I guess what I've been recently noticing, and so I'll be interested to hear what other people have to say, is just that the sort of umbrella term of mental illness covers such a spectrum from like serious sort of disorders that really impair somebody's life to the experience of just anxiety or depression, states of mind that we can all go through, or that we all do go through, and yet that is sort of on that spectrum of illness, just like, I have a cold. It's like, I'm going through this tough mental, physical, state or something. Yeah. And so it's hard to discern, talking about those different categories. But as far as sort of the anxiety, depression, states like that in a lot of ways, from a Swedenborgian perspective, have a place in just, that's part of our spiritual development, is like we're going to go through states like that. And so less of it being something's wrong, we need to get rid of this experience as soon as possible or something. Like there's a way to sort of, okay, this is what's happening. There's a way to hold the space for it and work through whatever's coming up, I guess.
Right. Yeah. Other thoughts? Chris Cara?
I'm having no thoughts.
Good.
I'm having mental
Let's just be
blankness.
honest about whether or not we're thinking. Well, where does mental illness come from? The last thing I want to say about that is, where does mental anything come from? The whole Swedenborg experience is this grand reframing of what consciousness is, and that we don't really go through anything mental that's not somehow influenced by our position in the spiritual world and how we're relative to communities and spirits and everything there. Just like here, I can feel there's like an air conditioner on my back here, that I can feel the lights here. Like there's almost nothing, very little that I experience in physical senses that's not influenced by my position in the physical world. So you couldn't just single it out and say that, yeah, right, the states that we tend to categorize as mental illness come from some other source than all the other states. That this is, the whole thing is not answerable right now. Okay, but that's a great start. And I do feel like, yeah, go ahead.
I just find myself thinking the question of like, well, if we could understand where it comes from, what would we do about it? And I do think the sort of how can you approach mental illness is also from both of those sides. You know, like there could be some benefit to approach it from a very physical understanding, even to the point of, you know, are you like sleep, just like basic sort of like you were saying, the air conditioner, the lights, like we live in an environment that is so often overstimulating to even just our physical systems that we can have sort of disturbed mental states from just going through our days, you know, or something where it's so like there's physical ways to sort of adapt or adjust your environment that could bring some relief, and then also sort of spiritual approaches too that could help bring relief. So it's it's worth sort of taking you know, a perspective of all of those sort of categories to see how could things be adjusted to help create a balanced state inside.
Holistic look at it. Okay, so why don't we do a bunch of shows about that? I mean, we sort of have. No, I'm sure we'll do more. But great question, Candace. Thanks so much. Let's look at the next one. Pete Dawson, in December 2004, a tsunami in Indonesia killed 225,000 people. How did the spirit world handle all those souls coming over at once? How is something like that organized? So, yeah, I mean, what if there's a balance we're talking about in the afterlife to this life? If there are all these complex placements that Swedenborg describes of where people are and where they end up, like even looking past the tragedy and the sadness for all the people who are here still and have lost people, how does that even work? Maybe you guys have answers to that. My sense is there's not a lot of description on it, but is anything popping out to anyone?
Some of the thoughts I have around that kind of question would be that, so I mean, the spiritual world is without time and space, although there's a semblance of that there, just to show progression. Swedenborg does say that the more people enter into something, the more perfect it becomes. So I would imagine that while it's hard to answer that directly, how is this whole like kind of infusion of hundreds of thousands of people organized? That's something that I've not encountered in Swedenborg before. But I do know that heaven delights in more and more people coming into the system to make the whole better. So there's a desire for new angels outside of tragedy, of course.
Right.
And there's not just one set of pearly gates.
Yeah.
So there's a lot more than 225,000 souls in heaven that are, the way Swedenborg makes it sound is a lot of those people, the angels, are employed in welcoming those who are coming from Earth. So I think there's plenty of people to assign to the jobs.
Yeah.
Right.
The only thought that's coming to my mind too about that is that I think it's somewhere phenomenal, like you can just miss it, but that Swedenborg says, I guess maybe in Heaven and Hell or Conjugal Love or something, where some remark, it's almost like a passing remark, but he says something like a quarter of heaven or something is made up of infants who have passed on, who have like become angels from infancy, you know, and like so just this like heaven is totally weighted to the side of just like these angels that just had the briefest time on earth and are now just this like these forces of love in the afterlife. And I just, for some reason, that came to mind of like when you have some like massive amount of sort of tragedy and this, you know, people moving on to the other world, I just think of that, how many more of these just completely, you know, angelic beings are just there to welcome people.
Yeah, right.
Like Para was saying.
At one point he just says, moving to the spiritual world from the physical world is like moving from a little town to a great city. And that we think of it as, there's one place, there's heaven, how do people get into it? But you think about the world and how big it is and how do we handle the influx of new people being born all the time, that there it's even a much larger system
right,
that is just as real and just as vivid as what's going on here. So thanks, Pete, for giving us something to think about there. Hey, let's take a look at the next one. This is Jen. Will we experience emotions such as love or fear or disappointment in heaven? What do you think? Is it all joy? Well, so I wouldn't say that because we got love in there. Yeah. Is there the same variety of emotions that we have here? Or is that side of life still valued and important? Are we just looking at amazing books the whole time? What's it like? What's the emotional side of not even just life after death, but heaven like?
I don't think it's it's not quite the same as being on Earth, the kind of like intense negative emotions that you can experience in our earthly life. But Swedenborg does say how angels, we retain our sense of self, and our sense of self is what, when we get caught up in our own self-image and in our own self-concern, that is what brings on such negative emotions like fear and disappointment and, you know, that kind of stuff. And so he does say that angels still have a sense of self, and so they go through phases where that self-concern is more or less kicked up in them, and when it gets kicked up, they kind of descend a little bit in their angelic state, and then only to become more, you know, reconnected or whatever on the other after going through a phase like that. So there is still shifting cycles.
There's still a use to some of those other states of being too. Yeah, awesome, Chris.
I just had a random image pop in my head about like when angels experience inhabitants in hell, thinking about like just different situations. And I could imagine that an angel would desire and feel, I don't know about disappointment, but just truly desire that people experience outside of heaven what heaven's joy is like. And so if I think about the range of emotions you might experience as an angel, it's encountering people, knowing the system that you're in, how profoundly connected and loving that space is. When you see people operating outside of that, of their own accord, I'd imagine there's some kind of
heartache
stirring of something like that. Yeah,
right,
exactly.
Right. Yeah.
So
yeah.
Good point.
Well, the spirits that Swedenborg is around certainly display all kinds of emotions, and even the angels. The angels will sometimes
they've got attitude sometimes,
be like indignant or like almost through translation, like a little snarky. And so there's definitely not that people have kind of checked out and they're just blissed out and hey man, everything's fine.
Sassy
even though
angels.
they got this sort of sassy angels. But what I'm thinking about is, does God experience that stuff? And we can't understand God in essence, Jesus as person, as divine coming into, or the divine that we can see and understand best. Jesus had fear. When there's all these kinds of stories about Jesus kind of waking up to we just in a recent episode of I think of Swedenborg Life Live talked about Jesus starting to understand how bad the state of the human race was, and almost not wanting to deal with that, just knowing how much risk there was. There was certainly fear experienced there. I would think angels, Swedenborg talks about holy fear, or that fear is always going to kind of accompany the potential to have something you love harmed. And so when we just love our reputation and material gain, when that stuff is threatened, there's fear all around. But even though angels have this trust in God, they care so deeply about stuff that when that about people, when that's threatened, I imagine there's some kind of fear there. So,
Good point.
but all for a good use. But thanks, Jen. That's great.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
guys, I'm gonna have to cough. Yeah, what happened when I was gone?
Cough break.
We survived.
Okay,
I'm still here.
let's do our next question. Matthew Bush, please define poor in spirit according to Swedenborg. Oh man.
Blessed are the poor in spirit, for they shall be comforted. Is that the one?
See,
Maybe.
see God. Can you look that up,
Or
Chris?
see.
But look it up. Look up.
Commercial break.
Yeah. Because, okay, so poor is always has to do with humility, right? If you're being poor in spirit, you're not believing
Kingdom of Heaven.
something
that's
about what's that?
For theirs is the kingdom of heaven.
Okay, and what does it mean?
Chelsea?
Yeah, we could look that up in.
probably humility. I mean, that's what I guess.
Yeah, isn't that what you just said? Poor always means
Poor,
humility.
poor is humble.
Yeah.
But he will often
There's
as
probably
Chris
all kinds of fun. Yeah.
looks up that phrase. I think we can wait. Well, Cara, how was your day today?
That's pretty good. Thanks.
Was it good?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Time with my
Great.
little girl.
Oh, good.
Yeah, my
That's
little
fun.
grandchild.
You know, we're gonna get a cold front moving.
Yeah. Really
Can you
cool.
believe it?
Snowflake.
Historic-
above that.
historic
Prediction
something. And hey, what about these local sports?
Okay.
I hear the
This is
Sixers
too
doing
much
well.
pressure.
Okay,
I'm sweating.
Oh wait.
we got something.
Oh. No, never mind.
Okay.
But I know that Swedenborg would probably do a sort of spin on it that would surprise me, but just in the fact that the biblical quote says, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven, I just have to think that that's the sort of like, if you've got, I was just hearing about it's easier, the whole thing of like, you can't, it's like, a rich person going to heaven is like trying to fit a camel through the eye of a needle.
Yeah.
And like from a Swedenborgian spin on that, that's like, that is our ego, or like our sense of self, a really large sort of proud, sense of self. But but if you've let go of that or sort of surrendered that to to more heavenly things, then the pathway is clear. But so I would think that poor in spirit, gaining the kingdom of heaven, is that surrendering, like you were saying.
Yeah, because there's times when he
ego
just,
concerns.
oh right. There's times when he describes
Oh, there you go. Spiritual life of people who have been genuinely humbled. Anyway.
Oh, that's it? We had the humility thing way in the beginning? So I'm sure that there's more nuance in there, but it's interesting because at times he talks about spiritual riches as being knowledges of goodness and truth. So if you were just thinking literally, you'd say, well, poor means you don't have any goodness and truth. But I think really poor is understanding that none of the goodness and truth originate in you, are yours.
Yeah.
Like I'm poor, and this relates to Swedenborg's continually baffling stance to the spirits around him that he was nothing. That these spirits would come in and try to get his ego going in different ways, and he would say, I'm nothing. I'm really nothing. And they're like, what do you mean you're nothing? Because Swedenborg had this belief, such a firm belief that goodness and truth and everything that's great was coming from the Lord through him, and that really made him too slippery for the spirits to grab onto. They couldn't hook him. And I think if you're poor in spirit, you're saying, oh, even if you understand things really well, and people may even say, you're great at this, I like you, who acknowledge none of this is mine. I'm using this, but this is not mine. The God is awesome. That's the poor in spirit. That's how you get in the kingdom of heaven. That is the state of mind when the Lord rules all things. Totally. The king is not you're the king of the kingdom of heaven. You're living in the kingdom of heaven. So that's great. Okay.
All right.
So Matthew Bush, you got it. You stumped us the most so far. That was awesome to get to do a little research right there, and just proved how much we do know Swedenborg, because we said, I think it's this. We looked it up, and it really was that. So.
Oh, I missed somebody in the chat.
You're welcome.
Oh well, too bad we can't scroll up.
Okay, let's go to the next question. Brian Last, what are your thoughts about pre-birth planning, where we plan our lives ahead of time, even how or when we cross over? I do want to hear what you guys had to say about this. What are your thoughts on? Because that's definitely out there. Has everyone heard of that before?
I've heard of it.
Not
You haven't?
really.
Okay.
That we choose our own parents, for instance, that kind of thing.
I guess I've just sort of heard about it, sort of, pop culture.
Plan our lives ahead of time.
Yes. To be clear, I haven't heard of it in Swedenborg.
No.
I've heard of it on the internet, in videos, in articles where people talk about, look, this whole thing was, I'll tell you how I understand it, and you can react to that concept. This whole thing, us doing here, we chose, like, okay, we'll work together at some point.
Yeah, we contracted somehow to.
Right.
Or if somebody were, say, to harm you in some grievous way, you and that person worked that out ahead of time as souls. And this is probably amalgamating a bunch of different iterations of this, but I'll lay it all out there. So you did that, or you chose your parents, or you maybe have a little group that sort of rotates life after life. Some people, sometimes you're the kid, sometimes you're the parent, sometimes you're the enemy, and we are living out that contract, and the contract in the end, it's designed that we learn something through it, and then we've gained that wisdom through life. So what do you guys think? Oh, you want me to go first? Okay. Well, I do have, well, the thing that I don't like about it is that it makes it feel like this is all a play. That this is something we are acting out, even to learn something. It's fine when you think about it in the, like, this situation, if we had pre-planned that, okay, that's fun. When you think about the terrible things that people go through, something about that, and the choice of good versus evil, and understanding, really, I should do this, I shouldn't do this. If the whole thing is just kind of a setup, to me, that cheapens it. I can see, or that raises serious questions about that, and so I can see the other side, which is what a relief it would be if actually the people that you hate or you think are better than you or whatever. No, it is an amazing feeling when, let's say, sometimes when I'm watching basketball and people are really playing hard against each other, but then afterwards they're friends. To me, that is a little bit like, oh, that's nice. Or when you do see actors behind the scenes, friends with each other, the characters, you get so wrapped up in how they're attacking. There is something cool about that. My main qualm with it, though, is I planned out my life.
What do I know? That's
who are you
problem.
you're gonna outsource that to me? I don't think so, man. How am I gonna know that? And I had some great way. I don't want to be in charge of that. So
That's what I was going to say. Yeah.
Those are that's my, listen, I'm not trying to be offensive, but that's my initial rant about why it doesn't necessarily click for me as emotionally satisfying. And Swedenborg doesn't discuss anything pre-birth.
Yeah. The only thing that, I mean, this isn't a parallel, but what came to my mind was, like, Swedenborg's talk about predestination, and how, like, in a sense, he was working to give people an insight that predestination, which is essentially having a predefined salvation before you even come onto the earth. Your path is already laid out. You're either going to heaven or you're going to hell. It's already made up. That he's rallying against that, saying that any predestination but predestination to heaven is contrary to divine love. And so, like, God is always working towards giving us a pathway to heaven, but we have freedom in that. And that freedom comes over the course of a lifetime of making choices about who we fundamentally want to be. And so I like that idea outside of having no freedom once we're conscious in this life, because the path is already laid for us. That, to me, is less empowering as an individual.
Can we just do, if we're laying out things before, can we make them shorter? Like, like, I'm going to be living out the consequences of those choices for 35 years and longer? To me, it's like, that's too long for me to be sort of on rails and just living out what I decided was there beforehand.
Yeah, I feel like I'm much happier with the arrangement where there is a God and I'm not that thing. and my life is about having a relationship with that being and presence and source of wisdom and love. And so there's sort of a joy that I get to experience my life in this, self-agency sort of way, but to know that I'm not the one in charge is a very wonderful thing.
Yes, so. I find that as a relief as well. But some people don't like that. They want to be in charge of their own life, which you kind of are. But I like what you said about outsourcing. I would not want my limited understanding of anything to be what was determining my path.
Yeah. Well, I love diffusing credit.
From ahead of time.
I'm sorry.
Sorry,
I
go
thought
ahead.
you had like a dramatic pause
Yeah,
there.
yeah,
and I thought
was-
you had stopped,
yeah.
and I was like, oh my gosh, the people at home, they're going to be bored if I don't say
Radio
something
silence.
right now. Do you have any more things? Okay.
Glad we talked through that.
It's just bad hosting etiquette to just like cut somebody off at the end.
It doesn't sound finished. Go ahead. What were you going to say?
Okay,
Well, I'll share it.
No, I was just...
Is it hot in here?
I was going to say that I do like to look for, like, what's the truth of love in an idea? Or what's the love in an idea? That there is something... When I think about the depths of fear that I've been in, when I was most afraid of something and most dismayed by something and by life situations and having these existential fears about life or myself and which may not sound that intense, but when they were really intense, it would be the most amazing thing in the world. Like if you think about this situation, this person has harmed me in this way and I can't believe this has taken this course, to be able to be like, oh, it's okay. I actually wanted this for my own benefit.
Right.
There is like a comfort in there.
It's kind of like a segue to Providence or something.
It's
some version of, yeah.
Yeah. Well, and it would be like, oh, it's me, and this is the person I can trust the most is me, because the person I know has my back is me. So I do think, as Swedenborg is illuminating this idea that actually all the goodness and truth we have is coming out of the Lord. The Lord loves us more than we love ourselves. Eventually, we get that feeling of knowing the Lord is guiding things to the right. You get this sense of like, oh, that was me. That was me. So
right.
I don't know. I bet that if for people to latch onto ideas and love them, there's probably some truth in there, even if the details may not be actually representative of what happens. So maybe there's an emotional truth to that as well. I just feel like
totally.
I was a little harsh on the whole thing.
Yeah,
But-
well, that's what I was thinking too, was like where we plan our lives ahead of time, or even how or when we cross over, is like I might be in a place where I know that I don't, but I can trust that there is someone who does, or
Yes.
like I have that trust. So there's like a
Right.
when you don't yet, then it feels terrifying to you're free falling, through life.
That's good.
I'm coming back.
You're just like free falling right there.
I
No,
was
but that
concerned.
that is another that's another thing that it brings is purpose. That if you look at it just from a materialist, reductionist, nothing matters, and it was just an accident that all this stuff happened. And to be able to say, no, there was planning involved. That's where you have the Swedenborg idea of providence and that idea converging, is that there is order, there is planning. It's just the detail of where's the mind there? Where is it? Yeah. Great. That was awesome, Brian. Thank you very much. And hope you felt like we addressed what you were talking about. Hey, if anybody's enjoying anything that they've ever seen in their life on this channel, please take a moment to support us. We are a nonprofit, so we've got to have your support. Here's a little video about how you can do that.
We want the ideas and insights we cover to be available for free to anyone, anytime they need them. As a nonprofit, we depend on donor support to enable us to continue creating high-quality programming. This season, we're featuring the opportunity to become a member of our community of sustaining supporters by signing up to give a monthly donation. If you've benefited from our content, please consider going to otlemonthly.cosvox.com to join the central network of people in the world who make our work possible. Our sustaining supporters are the backbone of what we do at Off the Left Eye. Your support helps the ideas in our content reach and nourish thousands of people every week around the globe. We couldn't do it without you. Give if you can, receive if you need. If we cycle through this way, in the end, everybody wins.
Hey everybody, we heard a rumor going around that some people in their chat were asking, how did they look that thing up in the middle? And fair is fair. Our good friends at the website newchristianbiblestudy.com. There's a whole Swedenborg's Writing search engine in there, which we love to use. We're using it right now. Go over.
.org.
.org.com. Does anybody do .org? Yeah, I guess they do. So, newchristianbiblestudy.org. Go over there and hang out and search Swedenborg. Okay.
Yes.
Let's do some more questions.
Yes,
The
a
next
uniquely
one.
Swedenborgian Bible search
It sure is. It's
If
got
that's
all the
what
writings.
you just said. It probably is.
It's got a few of our videos in there. I hate to say it, but since Kendall M, since dreams are messages or topics from the spiritual realms, should we start taking them more seriously and taking note of what they mean? Are they messages that are tailored to us? Yeah. Are we
I think
sitting?
they certainly can be.
Say more.
That's just what I was. That was just a launching point.
Okay, here we go. We're launched up.
Like that.
I've noticed that I haven't done it much, but whenever I have started to take note of my dreams or write them down, they start getting more vivid. Or maybe I just notice them more, but definitely I start having them more often and they seem to hold more meaning. So it does seem like you can affect your dream life through taking it seriously.
Mm-hmm.
But according to Swedenborg, are they messages tailored to us?
I just saw a passage that says that's what some of the angels' jobs are, is feeding people dreams. I had never seen that before.
Yeah.
Dreamweavers.
jobs.
Right.
Yeah, I think Swedenborg gives a list somewhere.
A list.
No. Of the different kinds of dreams that we can have, and that some of them definitely are have sort of spiritual nutrition in them. And then some are sort of less so. But I really wonder, I feel like I've said this before maybe when we've had questions on dreams, but I do think that there can definitely be a use for reflecting on our dreams, and because we'll find something out of them,
Right.
and sometimes you can be struck. I guess I sometimes for myself think about what the feeling is that it is giving me. If it's a strong feeling, whether it's negative or positive, that sort of I feel like that sort of alerts me to pay a little bit more attention to it. But usually if it's a negative one, I have to let it sit for a while before I sort of slough off the layers underneath the sort of what might be scary elements or something and get to something just like, sometimes it's just the purest, simplest little message that is like direct, and yet for some reason it came with like all these layers of intense scary feelings around it or something. So that's I always just think, don't just like, oh, I don't want to look at that if it's a scary one or something. It's like it can take some time, but there are sometimes really sweet messages in the scary ones.
So I found a passage that talks about 3 types of dreams.
3 types of dreams.
Maybe I could read it real quick.
Secrets of Heaven, 1976.
Yes, that's right.
That was a good year.
It was a great year. Great year. Okay, so there are 3 types of dreams. The first type comes from the Lord immediately by way of heaven. Such were the prophetical dreams spoken of in the Word. The second type comes by way of angelic spirits, especially those who are situated in front and above, or over towards the right where the paradise gardens are.
Pure Swedenborg.
Pure Swedenborg, 1976. This was the source of the dreams that members of the most ancient church had, so the earliest people, dreams that were instructive. The third type comes by way of the spirits who are close to a person when he is asleep. These 2 carry spiritual meanings. Delusory dreams, however,
Oh, this is a 4th?
It is.
However,
A 4th, yeah.
they come from a different source.
Delusory. So that means delusional?
No, it's dreams for the losers. Thank you.
Do we need the Latin, Cara? Do we need to?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of it. I mean, it's related to delusion. Does that mean
So it
Anyway.
sounds like, are they messages that have value and meaning?
Aliunde? Is that one?
from another source?
Oh,
That
Somnia.
means Fantastica.
Fantastica.
Well, that sounds good. Fantastica.
Yeah.
So it sounds like
So they can be sort of the like Inside Out, like the
It's-
dream sequence in Inside Out.
Just
I
like
still haven't
fantasy.
seen
Come on,
Inside
guys.
Out.
That's so funny.
Oh.
No, I haven't. I heard it was really good.
I've never seen
Let's
it.
watch it right
I
now.
won't
Can you look it up on YouTube?
Sure, you want to watch that?
Do you have
So,
Netflix?
I do.
but so we list these 3 types of dreams, and they all sound spiritually meaningful. It's just like different grades, like your maple syrup, like A, B, C. Like it sounds like that's what you get with your dreams.
Yeah.
instructional, really instructional, or like heavenly,
Yeah.
the Lord instructional.
Yeah, meaningful, instructional, and seriously.
Super download or something that.
Then
That's
the
so
fourth
interesting.
one.
The fourth one.
Prophetical.
Come from a
Delusory.
different source.
Yeah,
What
so-
the heck is that?
And I've heard him
I know.
other times say
Different
you
source.
can get dreams that are intentionally misleading or negative from evil spirits, and but to me it's like when I write down dreams and this objects in them and the symbols, I do like to hold it really loose because they're speaking a language and I don't know if I know what that language is. Like,
Yeah.
if there's a dog, I have a dog in a dream that's green, I gotta get it green. I gotta paint my dog green. It's not that simple, and that people can certainly latch onto something in a dream and it can cause a problem for them. So you can let it, as you were describing, Chelsea, let it settle in your mind, and eventually God can pull meaning out of it. If it's there.
Yeah.
Any other?
I guess I just sort of think that like our minds are designed to dream. Like we have this capacity for dreaming and we need it. Like it helps our health, does things for our brains, and like, but it's like not every time you do that thing, it's necessarily going to end up being this
Some conscious
vessel
piece
of spiritual whatever messages. But it's like, but that's still a valuable, I don't know. I'm just thinking like if I draw pictures, I might draw a bunch of different pictures and one of them's really great, but some of them are like, they were good practice, but it was just sort of a mess of things or something.
Yeah.
I don't know. So
I'm thinking of a mailbox. And when I go to the post office to open up my mailbox, some of the stuff, whoa, this really means something to me.
Right.
The other thing is like,
Yeah.
throw that away. But they're all in my mailbox together. So cool,
Yeah.
Kendall. Good. Thanks for giving us a chance to think about some dreams. Let's do another one. This is from Steve. If it's God's will, then why ask for anything? Hey, you guys are sitting around. You listen. Just choose a side. You came in at first talking about prayer and you're asking for people's experiences to match up with, but then God's got a plan. God's smart and good. So how do we survive in this world that has both of those truths? Or how do all of you balance those two seeming forces?
Well, I don't know. I think it's part of God's will that we live as if of ourselves.
Yeah.
So that's part of the deal. Like that's what the Lord wants, is for us to have this. The Lord really wants a partnership with us, and so that's worked into the whole dynamic. Even if in our show on like spiritual freedom, that we gain more freedom the more we are united to the Lord's will, just like how he says when the highest angels have this super clear sense of self, this like selfhood that is this unique thing, and yet they're the most connected to how they are nothing apart from the Lord. And so there's this like beautiful correlation between it being God's will and us feeling like it is us. So
Right.
that's a cool thing.
Yeah, happening. You guys have any thoughts on that conundrum?
I go back to what I said before at the beginning. Is it just I ask for let me line up with it. Help me feel like this is okay.
Yeah.
I do hardly ask for anything because it seems.
Wait, you
Why
asked me
would
for
ya?
something the other day.
Well, I ask you for something, but I don't know about the big
Yeah.
guy. Yeah.
Chris will get things done.
No, I'm a go-getter.
Which brings to mind that quote about since the Lord cannot benefit us directly, He works through other people.
Yeah, that's right. Well, I'm not trying to, make enemies in high places, but God's will is not that strong. This is what I mean by that. God's will is, or it's certainly not an absolute power. In that God's will is for everyone, a heaven from the human race, for everybody to be deeply and profoundly happy. I even think Swedenborg describes it at one point. That is what God wants. How's everybody doing?
Yeah, right.
And the human race,
Right.
human race wide. I mean, it was order that God said that I want this to be freely chosen happiness. So I'm creating the a possibility will emerge that you could live in a different way. But really, the amount of we have a large opportunity to mess that will up, and even at a guess God could, but doesn't change that. And so we have to play our part, or else God's will can't happen. When we say "Thy will be done," we've got to say that in order for it to be happening. And I feel like the something that is sacred is the asking. That even the asking for something is an act that affects that. That Swedenborg says that the primary influence of prayer is that it introduces a humility into you, which does change the spiritual state of things. If you say, particularly if you're saying, will you do something, the conditions are different after that than they were before, because it changes. And there's another time when Swedenborg says sometimes when somebody really, really wants something and is holding on to that, God can't give it to them until they relax that, because if he did in the moment, that would just reinforce this idea that I need to get what I want, what my own power gives me things. If the end game is us having the mind that can accept love and wisdom because of our humility, asking for something is an act. Just like me going and helping somebody is an act, asking for somebody else's happiness. They've got to have some kind of, somehow, even though the impulse for that can come from God, somehow it plays a part,
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, covenant is a partnership. Partnership requires two active parties. It's like God's will is ever present, always guiding you in a good way. But it's a dance that you have to step into as well. So to ask for anything or to participate in anything is a requirement. I mean, you have to enter into that covenant willingly and actively in order for it to work.
Right.
And I do Swedenborg writes somewhere, I don't have the number offhand, but that the very part of a person that is animated by the Lord, like the part where the Lord is flowing into us, is the very thing that makes it seem as though we are acting of ourselves, so that, like, if the Lord's will is flowing through us, then it's going to have to be lived out in the form of somebody making a choice from themselves, so that, like what you were saying about, like, thy will be done, it's like, well, then we're the ones that have to go and do something. When I ask myself, what would be the Lord's will in this situation, I can think back on, like, okay, what does the Lord want? Like, what does the Lord care about? These different things. And I just often find I'm still presented with several options of what I could do that could all be in accord.
Yes.
Technically with the Lord's will.
Yes.
And so I have to go in a certain direction, and somehow me going in whatever direction that is participating in that life flow.
Right.
So.
Yes.
Okay, there you go. There's some thoughts, intention. There's all these choices out there. It was almost like, what do you, regardless of what happens, what were you trying to do?
Yeah, there's that quote about how you can't just stand there with your arms hanging at your sides. Participating in divine providence involves doing something. Yeah.
Yeah.
So weird.
It comes down to your own.
Who is it? Maybe it's
choices.
The doctor who says that, I don't know where I've heard this, but it's easier to move a body that's in motion than to get a thing moving from a totally inertial spot or something. Anyway.
Right. Okay.
That whole idea comes to mind.
Stuart, are we ready for the you-know-what?
Thanks, Steve.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much,
Thanks, Steve.
Guys, nobody at home panic. Okay. I understand me saying that's going to make you panic even more. We are going to unleash a feature never yet unleashed in this show, in the history of this show.
It doesn't even have a graphic yet.
Doesn't even have a graphic yet, because if it doesn't work well this time, we're never doing it again.
You might never see this again.
What we're going to do now is the lightning round, where we're going to go, since we don't usually have time to get to all of your questions, we're going to try to get to as many questions as we can in this last 10 minutes. We may even just have one of us or 1.5 of us chime in on these things as they go. We are going to try to answer all of your questions. Chris, you have access to the chat. Can you tell what people are asking that we haven't answered yet?
Maybe these purple ones?
Yes, I have a list.
Okay.
A list of questions.
Okay, just hit us with the first one. Let's see what we can do.
Okay.
Between now and 8:58
Let's do it.
million.
Question 1.
Okay.
Panel, are you ready?
Okay. Get your buzzers ready.
Yeah,
Okay.
we can snap or something.
Do you believe we come here to learn? This is a question from Mary Lee. If we do, are our higher selves unintelligent? Because there is no way my human self could teach my higher self anything I don't already know.
Whoa.
Do you
Okay.
believe we come here to learn?
Yes.
Yes.
If we do, are our higher selves unintelligent? Yes, they are initially, and then they grow.
Yep.
Wow. Okay.
They become better vessels for the Lord's love and wisdom.
Awesome.
Okay.
Ding, 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 ding.
Next question. Thanks, Mary Lee. Thanks, Chelsea. This one's from Patty Prescott. When I dream of people I have known who have passed over, is it really them in my dream?
Yep. If it feels like them, it's them.
Okay. Thank you, Curtis.
Great.
Next question. Debbie Mercer. What does Swedenborg say about schizophrenia?
He doesn't ever use that term. That wasn't a term in existence then. But if we're talking about hearing voices, he describes symptoms like that originating in the spirits that are around people.
Yeah.
Great.
Ding,
Thanks,
ding.
Curtis. Linda Barnes asks, I've had a couple of out-of-body experiences. What does Swedenborg say about those?
Out-of-body experiences. They can happen. Our spirit is in a body, and so our spirit can be separate from the physical body at
As he
times.
himself experienced many times.
Yes.
A day.
It's a lot of times.
So you still have a spiritual body.
Yep.
So you're still in a body.
Thank you, Chelsea, Cara, Dom, Curtis.
I didn't do anything.
Thanks. Sorry.
We are on a roll. Is anybody counting?
We've done 25.
Okay. Number 26 from Dave Collins.
Hi,
Can
Dave.
we come to harm in the spiritual world?
Ooh. Spiritual world.
Define harm.
Define
harm.
Yeah.
I don't think we can.
Yeah.
Can we come to
think we
harm in the
can.
spiritual world?
You can feel distress and pain and things like that. Real
Yes.
harm is spiritual harm, meaning the love of what's evil and false. You really build that up in the world. So the spiritual world is more that's coming out and you're living it out rather than you're learning to be evil in the spiritual
Our
world.
the earthly realm is the place of the sort of spiritual freedom where we're making those sorts of.
Yes, and the guidance from all the good powers in the spiritual world as you're discovering who you truly are isn't going to lead you wrong.
Ding, 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 ding.
Thank you,
I
everyone.
do need some sound effects.
We're learning.
Okay. Pamela Collins asks, does heaven have an emergency squad?
Heck yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Say more.
Swedenborg talks about Michael, the figure in the Bible, Michael and his angels fighting the dragon, and that Michael is an image of a whole community of angels who guard and defend divine truth, I think. Something like that.
Fighting
Protect
truth.
it. Yep. So it seems like that's sort of like an emergency squad.
Probably not for broken arms, though.
Right.
No. Spiritual emergencies.
There we go. Chelsea, thank you. Next question from Jen Bombay. I've been told when you speak your worries and negative thoughts out loud that you are allowing negative entities to also hear them and take advantage of your fears. Is this true?
I like talking to myself, but
Thanks, Curtis.
No.
It does seem like at one point Swedenborg describes the mechanics of the spirits could hear something that was said but not heard. I hope I'm getting that right. Don't take that too seriously, but there may be something like that. That thing there to me sounds a little more like the kind of fear that hell would want you in. If I'm working through this thing out, maybe you're a verbal. There's such a thing as verbal. You have to say
Processors or
something.
something, yeah.
That's it. Verbal processors. If you are one, I don't think you're in. I don't think the world is that scary that evil spirits are going to jump right on you if you say things.
And there's something about how it's more of an internal thing anyway. Like you, the negative entities are already they're by talking about something, you're actually opening up to the possibility of letting it be released.
Out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, thanks, guys. Next question from Roya Hadadzada. I wonder if the next world, I just wonder if the next world is much better than Earth. Why all people wish to have longer earthly life.
Oh, if the next
I'm
world
with
is much
you.
better than the Earth, why
I'm
all
with
people
you.
wish to have longer earthly life?
I'm with you, Roya.
Oh, I don't know. When they say you could potentially be immortal by putting your mental capacity into a computer. No, thanks.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
I think it's. I mean, people love the people that they love, and they don't want to be parted.
Sure.
People are afraid of what they don't know, what they don't know, and what they don't understand. So I can understand why people would want to hold off on that next step. But it sounds good to me up there,
Yeah.
over there, around us. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, guys. Next question. This one's for Curtis. Chelsea, do you have an album coming out?
Yes, it's coming out really soon. The album party is in 2 weeks.
Yes. It's called Confident Hope. It is coming out November 22nd. It will be available everywhere. And then, there's an album release party happening on the 23rd.
Awesome.
area.
Yes, thanks for
Watch
asking
out
that,
for
Joy.
it. Woo!
Okay, sweet. So we have 2 more on the docket.
Let's get done. Let's get
We
so
can
there's no
do.
more questions.
Yes, this one's from Rain Lion 0. Are dreams predictive to future events or contain messages from the other side? If so, how do you interpret them? Similar questions for astrology.
They
Ooh,
can be
like
predictive.
future. Mm-hmm.
I've seen it happen, but not all of them are, and there's many that predict things that don't come to pass. So
And there's something about holding on to a sense of, similarly that like our self-choosing is really important, that like evil spirits would want to take advantage of such a situation of like making you feel like you have to do something a certain way or something, if you don't do this, X, Y, and Z. So you might want to watch out for that kind of thing. But like if there's that sort of humility to it, I've heard people have dreams that, oh, so-and-so just passed over or is about to pass over or something. That kind of.
yes, I do want to say that the instance I'm thinking of a dream predicting something was extremely trivial. It was that somebody bought a particular make and model of a car when they, that this person didn't know they were even in the market for a car, but they saw it in a dream. And then that next day, the person called them and said, guess what? I bought the new car. It was the same make, model, and color as in the dream. But as far as I had this dream that I did this terrible thing and this terrible thing was going to happen to me, so now I've got to go make it happen. I don't think that often works like that.
Yeah. Amazing how it's so trivial. So
Yeah.
fun.
Okay, last question on our list for right now. I'm being told, tell chat to ask more questions, but we only got 4 minutes, so probably not.
Don't ask. If you ask more questions, we're in big trouble.
Okay, we're going to be in trouble. Just kidding. Last question. Trent says, or asks, did God deliberately make Swedenborg look Hufflepuff in order to ordain a later rise of the new church, e.g. by commanding mention of angels?
Is angels a Hufflepuff kind of a thing? I did a full-blown psychology quiz about what Harry Potter thing you're in. I am
Okay.
Ravenclaw.
I feel slightly out of my depth here.
Me too. I don't.
So
I don't- I
Hufflepuff.
don't know.
When I first thought Hufflepuff is like in Harry Potter, Hufflepuff is kind of like sort of homely. Like what's that guy Neville is in Hufflepuff. So is that mean Swedenborg looks weird so that or what? But that's not the question.
A later rise of the new church.
The later
God
ones.
deliberately makes
Angels.
Swedenborg look Hufflepuff.
So we can't answer the Hufflepuff. We don't know.
And we don't know what he really looked like. All we have is pictures
I should
of
call
him.
my
I mean,
daughter.
paintings of him.
Yeah, right.
This is
so
tough.
that something about angels. What was the second part?
By commanding mention of angels. By commanding mention of angels.
The answer is yes.
Yes.
It's a lightning round.
We all agree?
Yes,
we all agree?
yes.
Good.
It's all happening as it should.
Yes.
It's
Thanks,
all unfolding
Trent.
as it should.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. Great.
I hope it's not now.
Will Linden said only a Slytherin would ask something like that. All right.
Thanks,
So
Will.
everybody, thanks so much for
Now
that.
do the lightning like.
And if at the end of the
Yeah.
lightning round, if we answered all the questions, we all got struck by lightning. Like just graphic though. Okay, thanks everybody. That's the end of our show. Hey, if you did enjoy that show, don't forget you can always like and subscribe.
Ravenclaw. Okay, sorry. I saw somebody in the chat say that.
And to prove to you that we are committed to giving you a great experience with Swedenborg's material throughout the week, here's what's coming up for us. We've got News from Heaven on Thursday and Saturday. On Thursday, we're going to be looking at how order upgrades your life faster. And on Saturday, your thoughts will destroy you unless... Tune in.
Whoa.
Short clips. We did a poll. And the results are in. Did God create evil? Won by a handy margin. And next, there's an ecosystem in your mind. So we'll see those on Wednesday and Friday, respectively.
Very close.
Next Monday, we are going to be looking at the city of angels and asking, what would a city of angels look like? How can we take these concepts that we're learning? What would it be like to live them out? What if we had communities based on that? How are angels interacting with us now? That's all Swedenborg in Life next Monday. The Monday after that, we're digging into another biblical concept in Swedenborg in Life Live. Who are the 144,000 in Revelation? So much to do and see. How could you not want to tune in all the time, every day? Thanks, guys. That was really fun to get to chat this through with you. Thanks for the lightning round stuff. Thanks to all of you for participating and making it happen. Hope you have a wonderful evening, and we'll talk to you soon.